Welcome to Learn About Law. My name is Kevin O'Flaherty from O'Flaherty Law, and today we're going to talk about guaranteed maximum price construction contracts. Now, this is relevant to you if you're either the owner of a home or a commercial building that's hiring a contractor, or if you're a contractor that does this sort of work. We're going to explain how guaranteed maximum price construction contracts work, what contingencies are, they're part of those contracts, and what allowances are. So first, let's talk about the different ways that a contractor can be paid. We have an article at learn-about-law.com that kind of gives the basics of general contractor agreements. So that's some good foundational knowledge for this. So you may want to check that out. But there's a couple different ways that contractors can be paid. One is a flat fee for the entire project. Another is the cost of the actual materials and labor, plus a flat fee for each element of the work, or the contractor's fee. So it's kind of a cost plus flat fee. The third, and the thing we're going to talk about the most today, is the actual cost of the contractor plus a percentage markup for profit. So if the costs are $100 and the contractor is going to be paid 10% of the cost as the fee, the contractor's fee would be $10 and the total contract price would be $110. So that's called cost plus fee. And cost plus fee can either be a percentage or a flat fee. But guaranteed maximum price usually comes into play in a cost plus fee contract when we're talking about a percentage markup. And the way this works is that the contractor will bill the owner for all of their costs and invoice them as the project goes on for the costs plus their markup for profit. But there will be a guaranteed maximum price that once the contractor hits this cap, the owner's not going to be paying them any more money. So the cost plus fee structure could come in lower than that guaranteed maximum price, and in that case, the owner saves money and doesn't have to pay the full guaranteed maximum price. But if the cost plus fee invoices cross that guaranteed maximum price line, the contractor bears the risk, and the owner doesn't have to pay any more than that guaranteed maximum price. So a guaranteed maximum price is kind of a way of shifting the risk from the owner to the contractor in a cost plus fee contract to make sure that the costs and fees aren't going to spiral out of control. It's a way of putting a cap on it. Unlike a flat fee, the owner may be able to actually save some money. They have a maximum price, but again, the contractor may come in lower than that price. Sometimes the owner will incentivize the contractor to come in lower than the guaranteed maximum price by sharing the cost savings with the contractor. So if the contractor comes in lower than that price, then they get a certain percentage of those cost savings, and the owner gets the rest. So let's talk about how these are structured a little bit. Typically, the contractor will come up with a GMP proposal. GMP is an acronym for Guaranteed Maximum Price. They'll come up with a GMP proposal that has something called a Schedule of Values, and that's a list of line items. It breaks down the project into specific areas of work. So roofing, foundation, siding on a house would each be their own line item. And the contractor will estimate a price for each line item, and they'll include the cost plus the markup for that line item. Now, some guaranteed maximum price contracts are just a guaranteed maximum price for the entire project. So the contractor will say, if I've got 10 line items that each cost $1,000, the total guaranteed maximum price is $10,000, and that's all we care about, the total price. Sometimes the owners are able to negotiate that each line item be a guaranteed maximum price. So, for example, if there's $1,000, and I'm using round numbers that aren't realistic here, but if there's $1,000 for the roof and $1,000 for the siding, and the contractor exceeds the $1,000 for the roof in the cost and the profit, that it's capped off just for that specific line item, the contractor can't then transfer some of the costs to other line items. That's a better deal for the owner, because the contractor on a specific line item basis is kind of required to watch their costs and keep each line item below the specific maximum price for that line item. Often contractors will want a total guaranteed maximum price for the whole project and be able to shift costs between line items. So that's kind of a negotiating point. But when I represent owners, I usually want to push for line item by line item guarantees for the total price. So the line items in the schedule of values aren't the only elements of the guaranteed maximum price. There's also something called a contingency, and the total guaranteed maximum price is the cost of the labor and materials and transportation and any other actual costs, the profit markup percentage, and then this third element, which is a contingency. Those are the three things that you add up to come to the guaranteed maximum price. The contingency is basically a buffer between the contractor's estimates as to the cost of work and profit and the price that they guarantee. So again, to use round numbers, the contractor may think that the project is actually going to cost $2,000, but they might quote a guaranteed maximum price of $3,000. So that $1,000 wiggle room is the contingency. It's meant to be used for basically unforeseen events or extra costs that may come up in the course of the project. No one can see the future perfectly, even if they're good at estimating costs. So the contingency is a certain percentage of the project cost that is just kind of used to give the contractor wiggle room. And if they exceed one of the line items on the schedule of values, one of the dollar amounts that they've estimated, they can then dip into the contingency amount and use that to cover any costs over and above their original estimate. Any amounts in the contingency that aren't actually used go back to the owner at the end of the project, unless some other arrangement is worked out where the contractor's incentivized to keep some of that in order to keep costs down. So just the same way the schedule of values can be split into specific line items, and there can be a guarantee for each line item that the contractor won't exceed that line item price. In those types of contracts, the owner will sometimes want the contingency broken up line item by line item. So, for example, they may want whatever, for each line item, there's a 2% contingency. So whatever the cost of the line item is, you multiply that by 0.2 or 0.02, and that's how much of a contingency wiggle room for that particular line item the contractor has. They can only then use that particular line item's contingency for overages on the initial estimate on that contingency. So that's the point of negotiation. Contractors will basically want a lump sum contingency as basically a line item in the contract that they can use as against all of their costs regardless of where they are in the contract. When you're negotiating these, contractors typically want free use of the contingency. They want to just have that be their money that they can apply to whatever they want throughout the course of the project, and they want as little accountability for it as possible. Owners are going to want notice beforehand every time a contractor has to dip into the contingency to fund part of the project. And usually they're going to want a specific, particularized description of what that's being used for. So it's not just a blank check or open-ended slush fund for the contractor to use, because the whole purpose of a guaranteed maximum price contract is for the owner to hopefully save some money. Otherwise, they just would go with a flat fee. So the owner doesn't want the contractor to just have free reign necessarily to use up that entire contingency. That contingency is usually where the owner's savings are, because the contractor has estimated to the best of his or her ability what the actual costs are in each of the schedule of values, the line items, and what profit they're going to make. The contingency is where the owner can save some money if the contractor doesn't have to dip into that based on unforeseen events. So let's talk now about allowances. A lot of people confuse allowances and contingencies. Contingencies are meant to be used by the contractor to basically add to the base estimate of the price in order to cover unforeseen events. Allowances are basically set aside for decisions that the owner has to make later in the process. So the best way to do this is giving an example. So if the owner and contractor know that the owner at some point is going to have to pick out what type of tile to use for a project. They could use really expensive tile, they could use cheaper tile. The contractor will basically set a middle range number as an allowance. So if the owner could pick tile that costs $500 or $1,500 and no one's sure what the owner's going to pick, the contractor might set the allowance number at $1,000. And then this is the amount that is baked into the guaranteed maximum price for that particular decision. If the owner selects tile that only costs $500, then $500 gets knocked off of the guaranteed maximum price because they've come in $500 less than the allowance. So if the owner selects an item that is less than the allowance amount, that savings automatically goes back to the owner and the price is reduced. It can't be moved around to the rest of the contract. If the owner selects an item that's more expensive than the allowance amount, then that amount increases the total price of the contract. So it's kind of a set aside amount for just for costs and materials, not for contractor's profit for particular decisions. So we know you're going to pick a refrigerator. We don't know how much it's going to cost. That's part of the project. We're going to estimate what an average refrigerator costs, and if you pick a refrigerator that costs less than that estimate, then you save money. If you pick a refrigerator that costs more, then you pay more money into the project. So allowances are not usually a big contentious point of negotiation because it's no skin off the contractor's nose if the owner picks something that's more or less than the allowance amount. The owner basically just either saves money or spends more. It's basically an owner's option to spend more or less on a particular item, but we put it into the estimate of the guaranteed maximum price so that the owner and contractor have a realistic estimate about what the project's going to cost. And the contractor's profit and overhead and labor usually aren't baked into these allowance amounts. Usually that should be considered and baked into the rest of the guaranteed maximum price part of the contract. So the $1,000 that's set aside is just for material costs for that item, not for profit and labor. And that can be different if an allowance amount is for something that's much larger than a refrigerator or tile, maybe a wing of a hospital. That would be then you're getting into more complex negotiations about allowances. So the last thing we want to talk about is change orders. This is how the guaranteed maximum price can be increased or sometimes, I suppose, decreased. Change orders are the process built into a contract whereby the owner and contractor, by mutual agreement, increase the price or the time to complete the project based on unforeseen events, changes, the owner changing their mind about what they want to do, or plans that are incomplete at the start of the project. So there's some unknown unknowns, and if something comes up that is going to cause the project to be more expensive or take more time, then the contractor can request a change order. Or if the owner changes their mind about what they want to do, they can request a change order through the contractor, and they go through this process that's baked into the contract to basically mutually agree in writing to a change in either the total price of the contract or the time. And the important thing to remember is that change orders are different from contingencies. Contingencies are supposed to be used for basically minor unexpected costs that come up, as opposed to changing the entire scope of the project. Change orders are, this hospital is built on a swamp, so we have to lay a whole different type of foundation, or the owner's changing their mind and they want to add an extra wing to the hospital that they didn't initially want to do. So these are big changes to the scope of the project that increase the guaranteed maximum price, and they've got to be done by mutual agreement. If there should be also in the contract dispute resolution procedures for how, if the owner and contractor can't agree to how much to add to the price or the time to complete the project, how that's handled. Does the status quo go forward? Does the project stop and the contractor gets paid out for the work that they've been done? Do they go through an arbitrator? So we want to lay out, in order to avoid litigation, as much certainty in the contract as how this uncertainty can be resolved in the future between the parties. And so these are the contingency, the allowances, and the change orders are basically three different ways to plan for uncertainty in a guaranteed maximum price contract, and they all deal with different situations. And just to really quickly recap without beating a dead horse, the contingency is for extra cost, wiggle room for the contractor that's not due to the contractor's own negligence. The allowances are for decisions that we know the owner is going to make at the outset that have not been made yet. And the change orders are for basically unknown unknowns that change the scope of the project, and everybody agrees should, basically modify the price of the project. So that's really all you need to know about guaranteed maximum price contracts and how they work as opposed to other contracts. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks for watching our video. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. Click the subscribe button for new videos every week, and download and review us on iTunes. Visit learn-about-law.com for other legal-related articles and videos. Visit our business podcast and video blog, seizeyourbusiness.com, and visit makingrealestatefun.com for real estate videos and podcasts. Call us at 630-324-6666 for a free consultation.